fulfillment in just lazing, in inertia, in sleep. Slightly better than that is a materialist who's active, who runs around. But money is what makes him come alive. That's all that he lives for. And all his actions, all his decisions, whatever he does in life is centered around just money, materialist. Little bit better than that is a sensualist. Means, see, a materialist just wants to acquire money. He doesn't even want to enjoy it. Whereas a sensualist is better than that because he is then going around the world only trying to enjoy life. So he translates the money that he has into sense objects which he believes he enjoys. But the problem with that is that the more he indulges in the senses, the less he enjoys. So the next state is a person who is power hungry. If you look at people who are driven by power, they're not interested in enjoyment, they're not really interested in money. All that matters is how much power do I have. One step further, sentimental people. You see people, wherever they go, they collect a large circle of friends around them, but it's all about emotions. Their life revolves around just emotions. Go a little beyond that, there are cerebral people. You know, in the US, in North Carolina, that particular area is supposed to have the largest concentration of PhDs in possibly the world. And you go there, you meet every single person is a PhD, sometimes double PhD, and they're all knocking on the doors of a Nobel Prize somewhere down the line. You listen to their conversation, you feel like you're in a different world altogether. That's what we mean by cerebral, intellectual. And the last stage is where you turn spiritual. Now this growth from the lowest to the highest level of a spiritual being, unfortunately, does not take place naturally. Like when you're born, physical growth from an infant into a full-grown adult, fortunately for us, is natural. Whether you like it or not, you grow. But from spiritual infancy to spiritual adulthood, you have to make an effort. You have to make a tremendous effort. And that effort begins with awareness. When you become aware, okay, this is my level. This is what makes me tick. This is what motivates me. But beyond that, it's all blurred. You have to then make an effort to expose your mind, expose the intellect to higher and higher realms of knowledge, which will drive you to ultimately get to the state where you're a spiritual person seeking answers, seeking knowledge, who has that tremendous desire for liberation from the problems that you're going through. You know, all of us get hit somewhere down the line. But what happens with us is, you get hit, you suffer, you go under it. After a while, you recover and you're back to square one, the same person. Then you get hit by the same problem over and over again. And Vedanta tells us, it's not just in this lifetime. Again and again you're born, again and again you go through the same problems. So when you get hit and really hit badly, that's a wake-up call. You should get up and say, I will strive to make sure that I don't have to go through this again. And there is only one way in which you don't have to go through this again, which is evolve spiritually. Like Socrates said, he says, pain and pleasure seem to be opposite each other because they never come to a person simultaneously. But he says, the moment you are dependent on one, you are automatically asking for the opposite, the other. So all of us are asking for pleasure. By the very token, you are automatically asking for pain. So if you don't want pain, you have to rise above both. You have to rise above the pairs of opposites. So how to grow The first step is engage your demons, understand your faults. That is most difficult because each one of us thinks, I am an angel and everyone else is to blame. You know how low you are in the spiritual ladder if you're quick to find fault with others. It doesn't take a great amount of intellectual strength to sit down and pick faults with others. But it does require a great deal of courage, conviction, and strength to look within and say, yes, this is what I have. And this is what the Kathopanishad calls as avritta chakshu, where you look within. And such a person, he says, is kaschit dhiraha. Kaschit dhira is some occasional, stray, wise person. Dhira, hero. In the Indian culture, a hero is not one who goes out and conquers the world. A dhira, a hero, is one who conquers the inner world. And this has been our culture right from the beginning. Even till this day, we have great respect and reverence for someone who has conquered the inner world. So that's the thing. Second, identify your endowment. Means, see, the problem is, we get involved in petty little things. And as a result of that, we don't even wake up to our own talent. I know people who are enormously talented in music, for instance, or so many fields. What are they doing about it? Nothing. Why? Because they just engage 24/7 on trivial, silly, petty issues all their lives. And so are we doing it. Third, explore possibilities. Problem is because we're so busy looking outward that we never look within and explore possibilities. You know, this is another true story that happened. There was a pump. Two companies bought the identical pump for their industrial use. And it turned out that there was a basic flaw, a manufacturing defect in that pump. But how the two companies handled it was completely different. One company said, indulged in what we call as the blame game. Who ordered it? How was it ordered? Catch hold of the vendor, blame him, make him pay for it. So by the time they fixed the problem, 6 months had gone and they had lost a huge amount of money. The second company, they said, we'll talk about the blame later. We have a problem now, let's fix it. So they got their best engineers together, and apparently there was just some small minor defect in that huge machine, which was otherwise perfect. So because they got their internal engineers to look at it, they fixed it in less than a day, and they lost barely 3 hours of manufacturing time. This is what we do in life. We are so busy blaming others. We are so busy picking fault with others. We are so busy speaking ill of others. There are people who make it their lifetime mission in life to just speak ill of somebody else. And they're going knocking at various doors just to go and speak ill. Whatever it is. Even if you have been wronged. Even if the other person has done you immense injustice. And that's what Krishna is telling Arjuna in the Gita. If you think ill, you will get destroyed. Nothing will happen to the other person. So does it make sense to suffer for somebody else's wrongdoing? And that's what we need to understand. Explore possibilities within you. Commit to yourself. Use Obama's technique. Yes, we can. And you'll be amazed at the number of things that you will be able to do. The problem with us is we get completely confined with the thought, no, I can't do that. And why do we say that? Because the entire focus is on just me. And the last thing, which is fantastic, is look upward and inward. And we are doing just the opposite. We're looking downward and outward. So, let's begin with us look at the overview of chapter 11. The first 4 verses are Arjuna asking Krishna for the universal form, vision. Verses 5 to 8, the second topic, Krishna grants this divine eye. He says, of course, the outstanding thing about Krishna and Arjuna is that whatever Arjuna asks, Krishna wholeheartedly complies with, not sometime in the future, right there and there. And then verses 9 to 14, he reveals this universal form. 15 to 22, you see the awesome vision, and Arjuna getting more and more overwhelmed with what he's seeing. The next topic, Krishna shows him the destructive form, because the world consists of the 3 phenomenal powers of creation, maintenance, and destruction. So since Arjuna wants to see that, he can't show just the creation and the maintenance, he has to show the destructive form. So in the next topic, he prays for his gentle form, Saumya, and Krishna again grants it. Krishna goes back to his 4-armed form of Vishnu. Arjuna is now pacified, and the last few verses is what really matters. Krishna gives the final thing. He says, this is not the way to see it, because this is only a visualization. Visualization means something that only a few people see. In that entire scenario, the battlefield where there were thousands and thousands of people, there were only 2 people who saw this Vishwarupa Darshan. Who are these 2 people? Arjuna and Sanjaya. No one else saw it. So the fact that only 2 people saw it means it is a visualization that has been specially granted to Arjuna by Krishna, to Sanjaya by Vyasa, for a particular purpose, to inspire them, to get them to rise above themselves at least temporarily and see the magnificence that is strewn everywhere, so that you can come back to your level and work your way up. And when you work your way up, you will be able to see that magnificence every day, every moment in your daily life. It can't be spurts of enthusiasm. All of us get that. But these spurts of enthusiasm are meant only for you to develop this inspiration, to go back to your level and work yourself up. So, the last few verses are the pathway to Brahman. We now begin with the first verse.